You're listening to OPIS Talks, where you'll be in on conversations with insiders in the energy, chemicals, and environmental commodities markets. Guests share insights into the latest trends and innovations, industry challenges, and much more. Let's dive into the conversations that explore where the energy economy is headed, right here on OPIS Talks.
Welcome to OPIS Talks. My name is Denton Cinquegrana, and I'm the Chief Oil Analyst here at OPIS.
My name is Brandon Gormley, and I'm the Executive Director of Retail Software Sales here at OPIS. And we have a great episode for you today. Joining us are Brent Eubanks, Principal Consultant, and Mike Strickland, Managing Director from capSpire. Before we dive in, can you guys tell me a little bit about your backgrounds and who exactly capSpire is?
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for having us. My name is Brent Eubanks. Proud to be with capSpire. I've been with the company for about a year, but before that, I was working in refining, wholesaling, and ultimately retail with a refining organization and a large regional operator for over 12 years and running their fuel division, mainly in procurement and working in pricing as well. And looking forward to this conversation about what OPIS and capSpire have going on these days.
Yeah, and I'm Mike Strickland. Again, thanks for having us on. I've been in this space for about 15 years now. I started my career at Cargill up in Minneapolis, where I live, and I've spent the last 10 years, a little over 10 years, with capSpire. Most recently, I've taken over our advisory group in North America, which use consulting buzzwords, really focuses on solving problems in the energy space. Takes a variety of forms, but really just helping advise and consult on some of the problems that our clients in the space may or may not have the in-house expertise to work on.
That's perfect, guys. Brent, I was wondering, just me having a background as traditional C-store, what's the sales pitch? Why would one of our customers or any one of the traditional C-store operators here in the U.S. want to engage with capSpire?
capSpire overall is a global consulting company. We focus on buying and selling of commodities, moving the commodities around, and the associated technology and processes that's required to make all of that happen. Really, the value we bring is twofold. First of all, we're a tech company. Most of our company is very strong when it comes to solving all the challenges related to the technology required to support commodity trading organizations. But the group that I sit in and that Mike leads is our advisory group. It's a little different because we focus on finding those who are industry experts to help solve your problems. And we have a team of great folks from various parts of the commodity chain that we can help identify exactly who needs to be on what project to get that across the finish line for the customer. You combine that with our base as a tech consulting firm, puts us in a great position to solve hard problems in those spaces that are facing issues. Being from the convenience store side of things, I understand very clearly the challenges that all retailers have, and our experience with large and small organizations really lets us connect in to find where we can add value and solve those complex issues.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I guess very similar to you, Brent. I've been in the space now for a little over a decade. And there's consulting firms that are more generalized. It kind of sounds like you guys are more or less taking a tailored approach with subject matter experts that you guys have in-house and using real world experience to deliver a lot of those advisory sort of solutions. Whether that be from a system standpoint or from a technology standpoint. Am I sort of understanding that correctly? Am I illustrating that pretty good for our audience?
Yeah, I believe so. We really pride ourselves in the caliber of talent that we have, that they've lived the life that our clients have faced and have often solved those, both in their role with the company, but also on the consulting end of things. And so it helps us find ways to connect those dots between our clients to where we can get across the best possible solution for our client.
I guess I'm more or less curious. The majority of the conversation that you guys are having, is it with someone who is attempting to do something that they've never done before? Big merger, acquisition, moving into a market that they've never been in? Or is it, hey, we have an existing process, we don't feel comfortable about it, we know it can be better, but we just need help?
Yeah, I think it's both. We have certainly some engagements that we've had that are brand new things that organizations want to do. And how do you do them? How do you stand them up? What technology do you need? What personnel do you need? What processes do you need? But the other side of it is we also get those calls to say, hey, we're having a problem in accounting with a specific commodity. What can you do to help us with that? So really, we try to make sure that we're available for whatever those are. And we put the right people on the project because we have a good bench of industry experts that we're able to align with those needs and challenges.
And Brent, I guess a follow-up question to that, right? So in this world that we live in, that is, oh my God, there's a product for everything. There's a data source for this. There's a piece of software for that. Is the answer always technology? Is the answer always, well, there's this product over here, or there's this solution off the shelf that we can provide you? Or is it a little bit more, does it go a little bit more deeper than that?
No, it certainly goes deeper. Technology is great, and we have great partnerships with several technology platforms that we're able to evaluate based on whatever the situation is. But I think you have to have a competent team. You have to have folks that are bought into what your organization's trying to do. And you have to have processes and leadership that allows them to do their jobs. So part of what we do is technology, but also we're going to look on the people side, on the change management side, data processes, accounting processes, and make sure that at the end of the day, that the overall goal is taking care of their end customer as best as possible. And however we can deploy that, we're shooting to do that.
Yeah, and along with the change management side, I would say that's an interesting expansion in terms of what we do, and really driven by client demand. Is now 25% of our people in our advisory group are change management experts, are fully focused on that. And honestly, 8-10 years ago, if you'd say, hey, we want to bring a change management person in, I'd say, well, that's just consulting fluff, right? There's no need for that. But as I'm starting to see companies that have effectively implemented technology, they have decent people in the organization, but it still doesn't work, right? Something's missing. Something was broken in that process. It often comes down to the people side, and often comes down to failures in some of the core change management principles that, people weren't trained effectively enough. There's not executive buy-in. People aren't, at the medium to low levels, aren't necessarily excited about what they have. So tech's sometimes the answer, often the answer, but on top of that, the people have to use the technology. We're not beyond that at this point. And then more importantly, you really have to think about, the executive sponsorship, getting people trained appropriately and getting people excited about what they have. So that is something that I would say has been a unique evolution in the last 3 to 5 years. It's less about getting the technology because everybody's got it in some form, but now about kind of optimizing and making sure that everybody is using it correctly and also kind of excited about what they have to use.
Mike, just to sort of continue on that thread a little bit. So in your opinion, what I think we sort of just touched on this a little bit, but what makes capSpire stand out to be a little bit different than generalized, major consulting firms like McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group? Like, I was there was a joke at one point in time. Someone told me that was like, well, a consultant really just charges you to tell you information that you already know. It kind of sounds like you guys are getting involved, leveraging subject matter experts to share information that someone may not know. So is that a big differentiator that you guys see specifically for the advisory group that you have?
Yeah, I think that's our biggest difference, right? Is we have people who have lived in your world. And I think our view on that, I think largely comes from previous roles that I had where a lot of good consultants would come in, but, I worked in credit for a period of time and they would tell me how to do my job as a credit analyst at that point. Well, they didn't know what I was doing. They didn't know how to be a credit analyst. And I found that to be incredibly frustrating for somebody to come in, tell me how to rewrite my processes, redo my job, and tell me how to do things differently when they just didn't actually know, right? They didn't know the answer because they've never lived it. And that kind of I guess, formed my perspective and my opinion on what makes a great consulting firm. And when I had the opportunity to start to build out and grow the advisory practice, Brent honestly was goal hire 1-1, specifically Brent. I wanted somebody in the energy space, so really not even energy, that's way too broad, in the convenience store space that bought or sold fuel, right? I mean, that's specific. I wanted somebody who understood the challenges of buying fuel, getting it to the store, and everything related to that, because we had a lot of opportunities in that space. I'd never done it before, right? So it felt incorrect for me to come in and say, hey, this is the proper way to negotiate contracts with large suppliers if I've never been on the negotiating end of contracts with suppliers. So it's one of those things where as we get into new markets and as we grow, the first thing that we always do as an advisory group now is let's go find that expert, right? We've expanded into power. First thing we did is we found a power trader. We're trying to get more into mid office and risk. And one of the first hires we made in that was someone who was a VP of mid back office for a very large fuel marketing company. So it's one of those things where I think it really matters that if you're going to bring in a consulting firm, somebody who's lived it. Otherwise, there's a little bit of guesswork. And then also, if you don't have somebody who's lived it, somebody who's an expert in the space, they're not empathetic to your problems, and they're always going to be coming from their side of the consulting world, which again, you can learn a lot in the consulting world, but I just think there's a little bit of a different perspective if you've got consulting experience, but more importantly, real world industry experience. I think combining those two is the perfect situation. And that's really what we are trying to do with an advisory. And thus far, we've had a lot of success with that model.
Yeah, and I think I love the example that you used, right? So supply contracts, right? So, Denton and I, we talk to customers of varying sizes, scales, geographies, what have you, right? So supply contracts almost always come up, right? And they're like, I know how to keep my head above water, but what I don't know is if I'm missing anything, right? Like I know that there's benefits to being branded. I know that there's benefits to being unbranded. I know that there's benefits to having a supply contract and having allocation and working off of that allocation. And I know that there's benefits of hitting rack at certain times. I know that I should be watching the market. I know that hedging is a thing, right? We learned that from Elaine just an episode ago. And it's like, before you know it, it's like, yeah, you need to be doing all these things, but it's like it starts to get complex fairly quickly, right? And I'm sure Denton's probably going to touch on that in a little bit. But so say I am a retailer. I'm new to the C-store retailing space, and for one reason or another. So how do I get a hold of you guys? Like, how do I start this conversation? Because there's a vulnerability element here where I need to approach somebody and have this conversation and basically share. I may not know everything that I need to know, right? How do I really engage and have some really good in-depth discovery around, hey, this is the piece that I want to fix. But let's not just focus on that. Let me do a full share and give you process, give you people, give you everything so that you guys can help me understand what I could be missing.
Yeah. So typically how it starts, right, is, we make some sort of connection, right? We go to a Sigma and we meet somebody, and most of our biz dev traditionally just comes from references, right? Of retailer in a share group talks to another one and says, hey, maybe reach out to capSpire. They do something different, right? That's a lot of it is, references, although we've got a great biz dev team that's reaching out to the market as well. But it typically starts with just kind of a discovery call, as you talked about, where, we usually don't have an NDA at that point. So it's really high level of who are you? But, we try and make sure that we're fairly well informed coming into that conversation. But, high level conversation about what are your needs? Let's talk in generic terms, nothing that an NDA would be required for. Hour-long conversation. We explain kind of what we would do, and then we get an understanding of kind of what their business is and what their challenges are. And then from there, obviously, there's an NDA process because it is really important to us, right? We talk to a lot in the industry, and it's really important that client confidentiality is first and foremost in what we do, and that we want to make sure that people are protected and their trade secrets and what makes them exceptional is held in confidentiality. So we go through that process, but a real engagement, typically is pretty minimal to start, right? Is really one of those things that we do in under a month. And this is one of those things where week one, we just put it all on the table, right? Let's talk to the execs about where you want to go as an organization. Where are you right now? Where are your pain points? That's really important in that conversation. But what's also really important is where are you headed? Are you going to do acquisitions? Are you going to sell off parts of your business? Are you trying to get into self-supply when you traditionally were just buying at the rack? Are you trying to change your contract and rack mix? Are you wanting to get trucks when you didn't have trucks before? What do you want to do as an organization? So it's really important in those discovery calls to understand where do you want to be, where do the executives want to be as an organization? Where do they think they currently are? And then, understand, where their pain points are. Then we take it a level deeper, right? That's where it starts to get a little bit more impactful as we'll start to talk to controllers. We'll start to talk to the head of trading, the head of scheduling, credit, accounting, whatever group, is in that organization. IT is obviously an important conversation, and really start to understand, ask the questions of what are your pain points? What's working well? What do you like? What's awesome? What makes it unique? But also, what are some of the things that you're dealing with organizationally that we can potentially help with? And then from there, we just start to put it all down, right? The first week is really listening, and I think it's really important that you don't try and problem solve until you understand the full problem. It's good to understand, we again, scope creep's always a challenge with consultants. So, we do want to make sure that we stay within that, but also we want to dig and find the source of the problems. What are the issues and how do we best, solve them? So, week one is just us asking a ton of questions to make sure that we firmly understand what makes that company unique. And I think what's fun is when you bring somebody like Brent in, you don't have to teach us how a retailer works, right? We know that, right? That's something that is core to our DNA. But what we really want to understand is what makes you unique, what makes the retailer unique, what makes the marketer unique, what makes, whatever type of company you are unique, so that we don't lose that in our recommendations and just try and make everything generic, because that in of itself, is a mistake. So really learning about the company as a whole, and then kind of next step from there is, clean that up, make sure that we understood that correctly, but then really do an analysis on how does that company stack up against its competitors. And that's one of those things where, anonymized market scan really helps, at an executive level to understand where are you above your competition or where are you below, right? Where are you behind? And I'm seeing a lot in this space be really interested in that specifically, where you see some of these companies, the talent is homegrown, which is great. I love that, but you don't necessarily understand where you compare to the market, where you compare to your competitors. So we do spend a little bit of time just doing that benchmarking of here's where you are when it comes to risk management. Here's where you are when it comes to optimization versus your peers. Kind of give them some of that analysis of kind of where the organization stacks up. And then we provide some recommendations of here's where we think you should go as an organization. See, here's some things that you should be working on. It might just simply be you need a controller, or you need a new system for pricing, or you need a CTRM system, or your accounting system needs to be upgraded. It could be a variety of things, and the problems are not always the same, and the solutions are not always the same. But we've kind of got our playbook of kind of normal solutions that we'd recommend, and normal problems that we see. But ultimately, our goal at the end of that is to provide recommendations for what are the top priority things you should be working on, try and put some sort of an ROI associated with it, but some of it isn't necessarily easy to quantify. Sometimes you just have to say, hey, I trust us, right? This is a good place to invest dollars. But, then from there, we try and leave them, with under a month of a set of recommendations and a plan for those as well. Not just, hey, go do all these things, but here's sequencing related to it. Here's, potential cost associated with it. These are the types of resources you're going to need internally, externally to make it happen, and really give them that roadmap for, what we would do if we were in their shoes to make the company as successful as possible.
That's well said. Last question before I kick it over to Denton. You guys obviously have had really great traction. You were at Sigma last week. You've had meetings there. Is there any, and I don't even know if you can share this, but are there any generalized common challenges that have continued to come up in your recent conversations in the last couple months that just it almost inevitably, no matter who you talk to, it's like, yep, that came up again. Like, are you able to share anything there that it just seems like, man, it's just everyone's facing that challenge right now?
It's going to sound generic, but everything around data, that is really where I'm hearing a lot of conversations. And it's less, 5, 6, 7 years ago, people were solving more AP, AR related issues. I got to pay, got to get my bills paid. And those that owe money, I need to get my receivables in place and all of that. I need to track transactions. I think people are starting to get a little bit of a better hold on that, but the quality of the data still isn't all that high. And then now where people are really trying to move forward is do something with that, right? Now that I've got data, I want to put it into a data warehouse. I want to put it into an analytics solution on top of that. And I want to use good, clean data that's accurate on a timely basis to help make decisions. And I think people are starting to be a little bit more forward thinking about that, but it's hard, right? I mean, it sounds easy on the surface of, I want to know everything I've purchased, everything I've sold, how I'm doing in every single day, and across all of my markets, across all of my commodities. And some people have that, but really taking it a step further of, how do I use all that information? How do I put it all together, package it up so that I can use that to make better decisions that are more profitable, so that I can understand my entire supply chain, so that I can capture my I can make profitable decisions based on my view of the market. I think that's kind of a theme, not from everyone, but you'd be surprised the size of a player that is starting to think that. And, that's one of those things that before a top 5 C-store would be asking those questions. Well, now, maybe top 50 to top 100 are starting to think about that. And people are less focused on just the blocking and tackling, and a little bit more around optimization of everything to get that extra, few basis points, maybe that extra penny in the supply chain, because that really matters, right? I mean, that's huge for profitability, but I think a lot of it is everything to do with data, but more get that data clean, get into some sort of analytic solution so that I can use it to make better decisions for my organization.
Excellent. No, this is, I feel like I'm going to derail the conversation because it's going so well, but I'm going to do my best anyway to not do that. So, Brent, you guys are consulting along the supply chain in energy, upstream with crude oil, midstream, pipelines, et cetera. Downstream, we talked about marketing and retailing. But can you describe maybe one unique challenge that, hey, we see this with the upstream and the crude oil guys, but we don't necessarily see it with the, with the downstream guys. An example of one challenge for maybe each sector, and how do you guys help them, kind of solve that problem?
Right now, I would say, especially upstream, given we just had an election here, and things are going to be changing. We don't know exactly what those changes are going to be, when they're going to occur, but I think everyone could agree, apolitically, that there's going to be a change in policy. And so your crude guys are trying to figure out what do they need to do in the short term to prepare for that? What does that look like? So I think that's the biggest thing we're hearing on that side. When you look more midstream, you're talking more trading related things, P&L, data, just like what Mike talked about. What's there and what can we do better in that space to be as accurate with our P&Ls as possible, day to day, what's happening and how can we replicate success. And downstream, really what I'm seeing is a lot in the mergers and acquisition space. I'm seeing a lot of opportunities there, people kicking the tires, people trying to make deals. And that's an area I'm really focused in and trying to help organizations through those challenging times of due diligence, through stand up and getting to day one, post day one, what does that look like? And really there's a lot in that area that's occurring, and we just really want to be positioned to help them.
Excellent. And Brent, I think you might be reading my mind, because this is just leading into my next question, actually. So with the new administration coming in January, expectations are for kind of a run on M&A. Now, granted, we've seen plenty of M&A over the past 4 years, but they're smaller deals. They're regional deals. It's one marketer buying another, where the family is just getting out of the business, say the younger generation who just has zero interest, so they're going to sell the company. But do you see any potential kind of mega mergers coming up? One example, and it's obviously not in this space, but Spirit Airlines recently filed for bankruptcy. They were planning to be acquired by JetBlue, and the FTC stood up and stopped it. And as a result, Spirit had to file bankruptcy. And, now we won't get to see any more of those fights on Instagram at a Spirit desk anymore, unfortunately. But JetBlue is also struggling. So this was almost a lifeline for both of them. Again, I'm rambling a little bit here, but any potential kind of mega mergers, kind of in our space. And again, if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to hold you to it.
I think you certainly have an opportunity more for it in this administration and the policies they're trying to set. I mean, at the end of the day, Trump's a businessman, right? And he is very much focused on engaging the private sector to help the masses. I think you also have to look at what Elon and Vivek are going to be doing in the Doge office. And what does that do to open pathways on regulation and specifically in M&A? I think you're going to have more chatter out there than you would have if it was a different political outcome. And businesses are certainly going to be looking for ways with corporate tax rates, what they're going to be, and with opportunities through this administration to see how they could position themselves with M&A opportunities.
Excellent. So any other, kind of Trump 2.0 energy market impacts? I mean, you mentioned crude oil and me personally, I think the whole drill baby drill thing is we are drilling baby drilling. My suspicion is that streamlining permitting processes, that's going to probably be part of it. And also perhaps opening more federal lands to drilling. Is there anything outside of that I'm missing, or is there anything else within the energy space that, you're kind of thinking about right now?
Yeah, there's certainly some issues in individual states that have come up recently. There was a report out yesterday about potentially restarting Keystone. I agree with you on permits, but I would take it a step further and say making permits more accessible for existing terminals and refineries. How can we take what's there and get through turnarounds quicker with the government help and support? We have plenty of facilities that are out there. Complexities vary certainly by facility, but these firms really want to invest, and there's big capital that's spent, big returns that are expected, and the government can really help in that permitting and approval process as we go forward. I mean, I live in Nashville, and we're in an area that we've had to find alternative ways to get supply here for refined products. What can be done to help expedite that with the private partners that are there? I think are interesting challenges that this administration is going to take on very quickly.
So Brent, I would consider you a MBUPCA, make permitting great again. I don't know if permitting ever was great, but let's go with that. So
make it greater.
There we go. Brent, we're talking about the intersection of fossil fuels and agriculture. Where do you see the RFS, the Renewable Fuel Standard, going? The Blender's Tax Credit and 45Z, which was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is more of a producer's credit than a blender's credit. Like, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think we look back 4 years and you had autos saying that they were only going to sell electric cars by insert date. And the consumer really didn't want that. So we're kind of reverting back to pre-administration policies on what's going to be out there. There's always going to be things with the RFS, with CAFE standards, with what the autos are willing to do, with the refiners are willing to do. There's going to have to be give and take, and there always is up on the Hill. As we look at it, what's going to be the next RIN? What is going to be out there that has to be demonstrated for compliance, that creates a trading mechanism that everyone can participate in and find value? That's something we're trying to always have our ears to the ground to see what that's going to be. When you look at tax credits, and 45Z in particular, if the renewable fuel volume goes up, that has an impact to the RFS. And we're very much in tune with that and trying to help our clients as they evaluate what are their options for capital deployment into 25 into 26 for what makes sense. And always encourage people, call your congressman.
And so where does, we hear a lot about sustainable aviation fuel. Where does that all sit? I mean, honestly, every airline would love to use it. The problem is there's not enough volumes out there. Is there anything in particular holding it back, or is it just there's just not enough capacity for it right now?
I think there's capacity questions. I think you're always going to have the FAA question of let's make sure the plane stays in the sky with what we're flying. And what are the engineering challenges with that? So I think it is coming. It's not there yet. You could see it more on smaller scale than full-blown 767s flying across the ocean. But I think there's a place for it. There'll be more development of it, and then ultimately have to be approved for carriers to use.
Okay. The way I love to end these podcasts is just with a kind of random question. We had a conversation before we started recording here. And Mike, I found out you're a pinball machine guy. So do you have a pinball machine? How many pinball machines?
Yeah, no, it's a weird love of mine. I obviously started in the 90s in Godfather's Pizzas or any other of those places where I was bored eating and wanted to go play pinball. But, it's just something that I've loved. I'm not great at it, but I'm good enough. But, we just bought a house and there's a weird niche, kind of corner that just, craves a pinball machine. So we're in the process of buying one. We were at NACS and I finally got lucky at the tables. So brought home a little cash for the pinball machine. So excited about that. But, the holy grail for me is the Addams Family. It's kind of a standard 90s pinball machine. It's got the little hand that comes in and takes the ball out of the machine. And it's a great one. So we're looking to get one of those. Hopefully it doesn't lead to an obsession and, 5 or 6 of those, because I don't think the wife would love that. But yeah, that's the next big purchase we're eyeing is that. And hopefully we can, I'll come over and play in the next few months once we get one.
There you go. And if you ever happen to find yourself in New Jersey, in the Jersey Shore area, Asbury Park has this place called the Silver Ball Arcade or Silver Ball Museum, and it's a pinball arcade. So you let me know. We'll go down there and spend a couple hours playing pinball. Mike, Brent, I want to thank you guys for your time. Brandon, great job as always. A lot of fun, and I hope we get to do it again.
We hope you've enjoyed today's insider conversation on Opus Talks. Join us next time for a deep dive into another industry insider's world. You can find more Opus Talks episodes at opusnet.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.